Okay, hello everyone. Greetings. Good morning, good Monday, good semester, good end of August. Welcome. Howdy. This is a introductory video that I record each new time that I teach an online class. I'd like to start the semester with a fresh hello, talking to you live. It is the first day of the fall 2023 semester, and I'm talking to my Communication Studies 409, the Rhetorical Tradition class. And so I'm going to take about maybe 15 minutes or so just to talk about the class, walk through the syllabus a little bit, and just try to give you a sense of what you're going to be, encountering over the next, 15 or so weeks. And, how the class will be structured and the assignments and, tips and tricks for success along the way. So first of all, howdy, my name is Donovan Conley. I am an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies. I've been here for quite a while. I'm the most senior member of our program at this point. I got here in 2004, and I've been here ever since, and I've been teaching this class or some version of it pretty much the whole time. So this is like an old friend, this class. It's kind of like the required class that I've been doing for a very long time. It has evolved, it has changed, and of course the delivery style of this class has changed as well. But it's largely the same class. We're dealing with a very ancient body of knowledge, and I have over the years tried to figure out what are the key parts of this story. We're covering over 2,500 years of human social, cultural, political, technological, discursive history here. And so this is a highly selective and just the kind of tip of the iceberg kind of a class. But hopefully we will have a decent sense of what is rhetoric, where do we find it, how does it work? How does it work well? How does it work poorly? How does it affect you? How does it involve you on a daily basis? Maybe if you're not even aware of it, right? And maybe how can we do it better? And how can we spot when it's not going so well? These are some of the important questions that we ought to be asking right now. Rhetoric, for just a kind of quickie version of what we're talking about here. Going back to Aristotle, it is persuasion. When we talk about rhetoric, we're talking about persuasion. There's many different definitions that we can point to that are kind of like spin-offs of this Aristotle idea of rhetoric as persuasion. We're talking about rhetoric when we're talking about persuasion, when we're talking about argumentation, when we're talking about symbolic action or influence, when we're talking about appeals, when we're talking about even technological kinds of influences, right? So I think about rhetoric as this kind of invisible set of tools and resources that we draw on as we try to move and influence and shape our kind of collective thoughts, attitudes, behaviors, perceptions, right? We live together with a whole bunch of other people, most of whom we don't know. Rhetoric is how we attempt to do things together. Right? And so going back to the beginnings, as we will start off in this class, we will see that rhetoric was about, oral pleading. It's about standing in front of your peers, a jury perhaps, or an assembly of decision makers about how we should proceed in the future, right? But it's about us trying to convince, trying to persuade, trying to influence others to think the same, act the same, or differently. Let's go in this direction, let's do that, right? But we're in the realm of rhetoric when we're in the realm of symbolic or linguistic attempts to influence, to shape perception, to shape behavior, to achieve a certain outcome, right? There's more that we could add to that, but that's a pretty decent way to kind of get going here. So you're not too far off if you think about rhetoric as persuasion. And we're going to start off looking at that as a very kind of specific thing. Oral, right? An audience right in front of you, using arguments, using appeals, like very kind of tactical and deliberate efforts to try to win over an audience. But as you'll see as we proceed throughout this semester, that the very nature of rhetoric and how we think about it and how we engage in it evolves over time. So how we're going to approach this very big tradition, this vast history with all of this stuff, these different events and developments and writings, obviously, and teachings and different figures, and it spans pretty much the entirety of the Western tradition. And we could also talk about Eastern rhetorics, and that's now becoming more of a thing. So it's a massive, massive kind of global, even cosmically huge topic. The way we're going to try to simplify matters is to talk about four major traditions, and that's what we're going to be doing sort of right off the bat. The four major traditions, or I sometimes call them the models of rhetoric. And so the argument here is that, we can talk about rhetoric in many, many ways, and we can talk about it as being many different kinds of things. But these four kind of major traditions are probably, I think, the best and handiest way to get a sense of the range of possibilities that we're talking about when we're talking about rhetoric. So we've got the Platonic model, and then we've got the Aristotelian model. Actually, first we've got the Gorgianic or sophistic model, then Platonic, and then Aristotelian, and then Isocratean/Ciceronian. So the four main traditions are kind of exemplified by these ancient figures who kind of espouse different ways of thinking about and conducting this business of rhetoric. So we're going to start off this semester looking at those models, the authors, the main readings, the questions that are raised, the kind of ideas that are advanced, and then we want to be thinking about those as a kind of an example of a kind of dominant rhetoric, or way of thinking about rhetoric. And I think it'll become clearer as we get into it that there are quite different approaches. A lot of times students report when I ask questions on the exams about hey, what's something that, kind of blew your mind, or that you didn't know about, or that surprised you, or that stood out to you in some way? And a lot of times students will say, I didn't realize that rhetoric was just so kind of multifaceted and take so many different forms, right? It's not just arguing, or it's not just this explicit attempt to persuade. It's not just advertising, right? It encompasses a lot. And what we want to do in this class is to get a better handle on what's more specifically it does encompass. And when we're thinking about it in kind of a daily basis, an everyday basis, be a little bit more mindful of when it's working well and when it's working less well, right? Because in rhetoric, we're very hip to the very possibilities of all different kinds of influence. I study food. I study technology. I'm a rhetoric scholar. I write about food, right? So I make the argument that food itself can be a resource of change and influence and persuasion even, right? And so, what we want to be doing is be thinking about where the influence is coming from and how that influence is happening, and whether the means by which that influence is happening are ones that we think are robust and of integrity and coming from a good source, or if it is just kind of raw, sophistic, influence, right? Anyway, we're anticipating a little bit where we'll be going, but that's sort of the general kind of sense of the class and the kinds of things that we'll be talking about and asking questions about and learning more about. It really is a class, I think, in how we live together and how we can kind of do that better or do it worse. Feels like we're living in a time of doing it worse. And lo and behold, rhetoric as a subject in our department, across the academy, is starting to lose its luster, its cachet. Students are not as interested in studying or learning about rhetoric as they were even 10 years ago. To me, that's a sign of the times. That's a symptom of the kind of loss of this kind of interest in the collective nature of our kind of social bond, right? There's not a lot of interest in how do we be better when we are kind of out together, amongst a bunch of strangers. How can we do that better? How can we engage one another in more healthy and robust ways? Now there feels like there's this kind of pulling away from one another. And as a consequence, we're pulling away from the study and practice of rhetoric itself. I see that as being a concerning matter, right? And so I think this class, you're going to struggle. You're going to struggle with some of the language. You're going to struggle with some of the ideas. But I do believe that if you kind of stick with it and really kind of lean into it, you will get a lot out of it in terms of the kind of questions and the kind of themes and issues that have been talked about for thousands of years at this point, and really do have to do with how we live together more healthily, more artfully or less so, right? And so I do urge you to kind of be thinking about these questions that we're going to be asking, and really try to chew on these readings. And we're not just doing this for the sake of doing a bunch of old stupid history. I'm not interested in history for the sake of history. I'm interested in these materials and the reason that we continue to study them. I've gotten rid of a lot of stuff off my syllabus from when I used to teach this class because it's just no longer relevant to me. I don't think it matters as much. But the stuff that's still here is here because it still provokes us to ask certain questions and think about certain issues. So, and my job is to be here to have that conversation with you. Obviously, I'm talking at you in these videos and through the syllabus and the readings and whatever, but I'm also available for actual conversations, right? So I'm teaching another section of 409 this semester where I'm doing it in person. It's the first time in a number of years that I'll be actually teaching this class in the classroom. Mostly because I've just missed my students. I've missed that kind of classroom interaction. But I'll be around, and the hope is to be having conversations with students. Just this summer, I taught this class, and I had a student who was just fascinated with this subject matter, and he kept asking me these really long, detailed, elaborate questions about what did Plato mean by this, and how can we do this. It was lovely. I absolutely adored that back and forth with this student. So please, I urge you, let's not make this just an experience of emailing about deadlines and due dates and I can't access and I can't see this. Of course, we have to manage the class, but I also love it when students take an interest and share that interest and ask me questions, even if they're like, I'm not sure if this is right, but here's a thought that I had. What do you think? I love that kind of stuff. Or I was out this weekend and I was at a play or a show, or I was out doing something and this happened, or someone mentioned this and it made me think about this. I love that stuff. So I hope we get to know each other. I hope we get to meet each other. I hope we get to talk. My office hours on the first page of the syllabus here will be from 1:30 to 3:30 on Tuesdays. That's when I'll be physically in my office because it'll be right after I teach my in-class version of this course. But I can also meet online. I can meet remotely. We can set up times. I'm pretty flexible. If I'm able to meet, I will do my best to meet with you. Just reach out. And like I say, reach out with any kind of question about the subject matter. Or if you have concerns about the assignments, I'd much rather talk to you about the assignments before the deadline than try to deal with messes afterwards, right? So do reach out. Do come by. Do say hi. Do email or set up a meeting of any kind. I would love it. So let's see. There is a text in this class, the James Herrick text that might be in my office on campus. It's the 6th edition, I believe, is the one we're using. So please do get the James Herrick book. And there's a lot of other readings that are posted into Canvas. And the way to do it is to just basically line up what you're seeing on the course syllabus with the flow on the Canvas main page, right? So everything kind of lines up in terms of what we're doing each week. Everything's broken down by weeks. We could just jump ahead to the schedule real quick. The course schedule is by the week, so we've got 15 weeks, and so each week you know what the readings are. Sometimes there's like additional recommended stuff. Sometimes there is a note about an assignment or so on, right? But this is just, if you're looking at this, like, so week 1, we're going to go over the course overview and introductions. That's basically this video. There's another video on the 4 main models. That's what you'll want to watch next. And you'll want to read the first chapter in Herrick, right? So that's this week. If you wanted to, if you're feeling ambitious, you could move into the next week. I've opened up the entire first unit, or the first module, which takes us all the way up to, I think, week 6. And you're welcome to work through that at your leisure. I would encourage you to try to stay with the flow of the weeks, because that's just how the class was designed, is like, here's a good chunk of material for this week. So when I'm doing my in-class class, we'll be doing exactly this schedule, and we'll be doing it by the day, by the week. So it should be manageable that way. I don't know that I would encourage you to fly ahead and try to get done as much as you can as soon as possible, because chances are you'll forget a lot when it comes time to remember it for the assignment or test or whatever. But as you can see, we are going back to the beginnings, back to the sophists, back to Plato, back to Aristotle, to learn about rhetoric in its kind of original formulation in terms of thinking about this human social activity, rhetoric, a thing that we do in the world, in our lives, all of a sudden it was a subject of interest for teachers, for public intellectuals, right? So all of a sudden textbooks and handbooks and school manuals and like an actual kind of theoretical record of reflections on the activity, right? And so I think of rhetoric as an activity first and foremost. It's something that we do in our lives, again, as we try to influence and appeal to one another. We're trying to get things done. I really want you to sign up for this petition. I really want you to stop eating tuna or whatever our thing is that we care about, and we're trying to get people to do it, to join it, or to stop doing it. Stop driving oil-based cars or whatever, right? We try to influence, we try to persuade, we try to impact. The ways that we do that is the rhetoric. And then there's the study of that. There's the reflection about that. We write theories about it. We do criticism of actual efforts to persuade, right? So in the more modern iteration of rhetoric in the 20th century, we started to think more about criticism. And we even have a class in our curriculum on rhetorical criticism, right? Which is like, oh, there's a speech that Obama gave. Let's study that. There's a speech or a campaign event that Donald Trump engaged in. Let's study that. Let's analyze it to see what's going on there and how it's working. That's my main job as a scholar, is I'm a rhetorical critic. I analyze the operations of rhetoric out in the wild, right? How it is that we collectively attempt to move and influence and persuade, sometimes well, sometimes poorly. So rhetorical critics are kind of like discursive referees a little bit, right? It's like, that was a good usage of that argument, or that was a really bad way of trying to appeal to one another. You belong in the penalty box. Anyway, so the James Herrick book, the stuff in Canvas, following along the syllabus, following along the schedule. I think this class is in some ways maybe a little bit harder than other classes in terms of there's a lot of material and it's a little weird because you're reading kind of ancient Greek stuff even though it's translated in English. So that part of it is a challenge, I acknowledge. But on the other hand, there's only 4 assignments that you have in this semester. So there's kind of easy aspects and there's harder aspects. I like the idea of having 4 nicely spaced out assignments that will require you to prepare, to be ready, to have worked through the materials, to have absorbed it, to have thought about it. And then the assignments, 2 papers and 2 tests, they are meant to test your grasp, your handle of the conceptual material in this class. That's the main gist of it, right? The goal is for all of us to be better critical analysts of the kind of discursive operations of social influence that we encounter in our everyday lives. To be more aware, more astute, more conscientious citizens of mass social influence. So that's the goal. That's the hope. Let's see. So, sorry, I think my candle just burnt out. You know that sort of smell that comes along when the candle ends? It's like, oh, something just happened there. Anyway, sorry. So if you can see on page 3 of the syllabus, the important dates that we've got: October 8th, October 19th, that's the first paper, the first test, and then November 3rd, and December 12th for the second paper and the final exam. And that's it. So the assignments are spaced out nicely. They don't come at you in a flurry of little, things. They're big. So give yourself time to prepare. Give yourself time to study, to read, to think through the materials, right? So we're going to be analyzing a couple of films or TV episodes, something like that. Those are the papers. Make sure that you are really good on the theory side of it before you actually engage in whatever text we're reading, whatever show or movie or whatever. Make sure that you if we do Plato, make sure that you're good on the Plato. Or if we do Kenneth Burke in the later paper, make sure that you're good on the Kenneth Burke. And if you don't feel confident, that's when you reach out, that's when you ask me to meet, talk over the ideas, talk over the concepts, so that you feel confident with the ideas before you launch into the paper and do the analysis, or before you take the test. So that's it. So the exams are a combination of multiple choice and written response. And all the details will be in Canvas on that. Let's see what else here. You have the deadlines, you have the structure of the semester, you can see what kinds of assignments we're doing and when we're doing them. You can see all the topics. In terms of policies, it's the usual stuff. Obviously, AI, ChatGPT, and so on is the big new thing. It's happening quickly. It just, back in the spring is when it really just popped for the first time. And unfortunately, I had to flunk some students on the spring test in this class because they were plugging the test questions into ChatGPT and cutting and pasting their responses into their test. Wow, can't believe it. And I even posted a video in the spring saying, hey, go ahead and play around with these things, but please do not use them as a way to generate your responses for this class. So I do have a policy in the syllabus. We talked about it in our annual fall faculty retreat, all-day department meeting session just last week. We talked at some length about artificial intelligence. The basic gist of my kind of thinking on this is I have begun to use it in my own research. I ask it questions, I try out ideas, right? It's a hunch response kind of system, right? It's like, what if this? What about this? Do I know enough about that? Let me try that. But I always keep those results kind of to myself, right? Because I've also put in information and prompts and gotten bad responses, incomplete or flat out wrong, right? So when I say do not use any of these AI generators to generate paper responses, test responses, it is really for your benefit. It's for your own protection because you get a lot of just wrong information. It's not thinking. It's not thinking on your behalf. It's just scouring, billions or trillions or whatever pages of text to sort of put together what seems most likely, right? It's a probability kind of exercise. But it's not thinking and it doesn't care. And so do not use AI services to generate responses, to generate test responses, to generate paper responses. We have detection software. Chances are you will get caught. And it's just not a good way to do it, right? So by all means, use it as a research aid, as a way to kind of play around with ideas. But then, as always, please go and write the paper, write the test using your brain, using your own thoughts, using your own words, all right? If you have any questions about that, by all means reach out, but that's sort of the basic gist. Any new technology comes out. I remember Wikipedia back in the day was like, we got to tell our students not to use Wikipedia. And I would always say, go ahead and use Wikipedia. We all kind of do use Wikipedia, but don't formally use it. Don't bring it in, All right, so that's already plenty, 23 minutes. If there's anything else that I've missed or that you're interested in, by all means reach out. Otherwise, please launch into this week's material, watch the videos, do the readings, and proceed. And get ready for the first set of assignments coming up. We have weeks. Until the first assignments are coming up. So it would be very easy to just think, oh, I'm fine. I don't need to do much right now. I urge you to keep up with the material. It's challenging. It does take some time. Sit down with it. You don't necessarily have to read everything line for line, but you need to have a basic grasp of the dominant concepts and ideas for each week. And if you're feeling like you're struggling, that's when you want to reach out and set up a time to chat, just to kind of run your thoughts by me or get a sense of what matters, what doesn't matter, how you're approaching things. Again, I'm here to help, and I just want to make sure that we're all aware that this is a fairly arduous journey in terms of the material that we're going through, but we have a good amount of time and we don't have a ton of assignments along the way. But when we do have assignments, they do count, right? And so definitely give yourself time to prepare. Definitely be organized with each week's materials and not letting yourself fall behind. That is the best way that you will have success in this class. Also, again, reaching out to me if you're starting to struggle. That's another good way to make sure that you don't fall away, right? So those are my recommendations. Those are kind of the highlights of the class and the semester and what to expect. And I'm looking forward to it. I love this content. I love talking about it. And so I hope you find something to be interested in and engaged in. And that's it for now. So please enjoy this week's material. And if you want to say hi, would love it. Otherwise, go for it. And we'll see you soon. We'll talk soon. Have a great one.